Welcome, everyone. We'll be starting soon. My name is Christian Gaines. I am a senior at Newton North High School in Newton, Massachusetts, and I'm also a America's Promise Alliance board member. I'm so excited to welcome you all today to today's event. It's focused on celebrating and learning from Black youth leadership. The topic is particularly important to me as I am a Black youth, and it's incredibly empowering to definitely lift my voice, but also to inspire others who are just like me. As I remember just being one of the viewers or someone in attendance today, but to find their voice, that's why I'm here. We have a great conversation planned for today. In the first part of our conversation, we'll discuss the history of Black youth leadership and then the issues that are on top of the mind of Black youth today. In the second half of the discussion, we will focus on how Black youth and adult leaders can work together and share power with one another. At the end, we will have a lively Q&A, so please be thinking of questions you'd like to ask. Before we begin, I want to go over a few logistics for everyone. Please ask any general or technical questions in the chat feature of Zoom. Please submit any questions for panelists into the Q&A function. To frame today's conversation, we have a special video from a youngish leader, Mayor Brandon Scott of Baltimore. Mayor Scott is the city's youngest mayor in more than a century, and from his work as a mentor to his role as the city's leader, he has walked the walk when it comes to listening and learning from the voices of Black youth. Let's take a look at what Mayor Scott has to share.
Hey everyone, it's Mayor Brandon Scott of Baltimore City. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this incredible event hosted by America's Promise Alliance. We are here to do something very important. We are here to celebrate and learn from our Black youth leadership who are paving the way forward. As I always say, young people are our future, but also our right now. And I'm grateful to be in a role where I can make sure our Black young voices are heard, valued, and that they will always have a seat at the table. Every week, I take some time to visit our students and make sure our young Black leaders are engaged in the work that I do. I spent many years mentoring young people, coaching them, watching them graduate and become successful, and making sure that they have what they need to be the best that they can be. You'll notice that we have both adults and young people speaking at this event. So I won't take up too much time because I know we want to hear what this new generation of young Black leaders has to say. Young people are necessary for changing the status quo in this country, pushing for progressive change, and holding our leaders, including me, accountable. To put it simply, they are the future and they will let us know. I am committed to partnering with and supporting a new generation of young Black leaders, and I hope you will all join me in that commitment. Thank you all for having me, and I look forward to seeing how we can all work together to build a better and brighter world for all of us.
That was great. Now, to get things started, I'd like to welcome our moderator. Marissa Mitchell is an Emmy-nominated and award-winning journalist and is currently an anchor and a host at Fox 5 DC. Marissa is going to get us started with some introductions for our panelists.
Hey, Christian, thank you so much to all of you for inviting me to do this event. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm sure that it's going to be an insightful conversation. So I want to go ahead and welcome our panelists. Christian Gaines, a senior at Newton North High School and an America's Promise Alliance board member. Khalil Green is known for being the first Black student body president at Yale University and is a social media influencer. Trinity Woodson is a junior at Hampton University and an America's Promise Alliance board member. We have some adult leaders who will join us as well. We're going to have a conversation with both groups. Kiragu Biuta is a special education teacher, a comedian, and a revolutionary. Sarah Carpenter is executive director of Memphis Lift. Novi Craven is an athlete with Special Olympics, a coordinator at Special Olympics International, and a diversity and inclusion advocate. Salome Thomas L., also known as Principal L., is an award-winning principal and the co-author of the book Passionate Leadership in Building a Winning Team. And then we have Tysley Williams, the Chief Development Officer at America's Promise Alliance. Thank you so much for joining me. I feel your energy even through the screen. You all ready?
Yes.
All right. I actually want to start with you, Tysley. What can we learn from Black history about the importance as well as the value of youth leadership?
So Marissa, thank you for that question. And on behalf of America's Promise Alliance, I too just want to welcome all of our attendees and our panelists. So thank you, thank you. So as a caring adult, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I've learned from young people. Then I'm going to open up my ears so I can learn even more from the brilliant brains that are here today. But a little bit about what I've learned as a Black woman listening to Black youth is that it's really important for us to acknowledge, appreciate, and affirm what is often the overlooked potential and the leadership capabilities of Black young people. I think it's important to center the often overlooked for two reasons. That doesn't mean that it isn't present. It means that some individuals may not have the awareness or the wisdom to see the potential that rests within Black leaders. So I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about the youth experience. One thing, Marissa, that I'm going to center is I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, many, many moons ago. But when I was a young person, I was really struck by studying Black history, and in particular around Rosa Parks. And so we all know the story of Rosa Parks. She is known around the globe for the woman who really started the movement in Montgomery, Alabama, as it pertains to not giving up her seat on a crowded bus. But for those of us who are from the great state of Alabama, like I am, we lived within the truth, that which the world may not have known. And the truth of the matter is, before Rosa Parks, 9 months to be exact, there was a 15-year-old Black girl by the name of Claudette Colvin. And Claudette, who was 15, was actually the first person to not give up her seat and to make a stance against the inequity. What I have now learned as a Black woman reflecting on that experience is that there really isn't an either or. There is space for Rosa Parks and Claudette Colvin to exist. There is ample opportunity for us to lift up both of their names. And it is in that spirit of the both and that as we talk about slaying all of the evil as it pertains to racism and sexism and classism, that I just invite us to do what young people have always done, and that is to lead with courage, but to also lead with compassion. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Marissa, because I'm excited for us to dig into what will be varying perspectives and opinions, but I am really interested in hearing how we find that both and, so that we can bring our best thinking to ensuring that young Black people in America have the opportunity to not only bring their talents, but to ensure that their talents are acknowledged, that they're appreciated, and that they are affirmed.
Wow, thanks so much. I actually spent 4 years of my career reporting and anchoring in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was blessed to hear the story of Claudette, and it's certainly a good one. And I guess in that vein of recognizing youth leadership, I want to turn now to Khalil. You've certainly recognized your own potential, and that's what Tysley just spoke about. Why do you think we should, realize and acknowledge the importance and the value of young leaders?
Great question. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. So my name is Khalil. I am currently a senior and I study history, specifically the history of social change and social movements in America. And as a lot of us know, oppression, especially oppression against Black people, has been built on divides, divides between our communities, divides within our communities. And in this way, we've kind of been working against each other instead of with each other. And one of the divides that goes back to even the transatlantic slave trade is a generational divide, because even when we were brought over here, the slave ships and the decks were often separated by age groups. And that's something that we can see even till today, like divides between generations about how to approach things, whether it be more radical and progressive or more realistic. And all of these things are so important to talk about. And I think to the point that Tysley was just making, when we come together and we use a both and mindset, we are so much stronger. And I think that's where a lot of our power lies. Even someone like Fred Hampton, who died at the age of 21, his youth is what drove his investment into the cause and his huge imagination for what the future could be. So I think when we combine our voices and we incorporate young people, we're so much stronger. And of course, especially when we're both incorporating the young and the other generations together, because that's when really can make a change.
Principal L, what do you say when it comes to the importance and the value of youth leadership?
Marissa, I'm gonna thank Khalil for not calling us the older generation. He was very mindful not, so I appreciate you, brother. But excellent points. But I think why I'm so proud to be here today is that oftentimes we talk to adults about what young people need and what young people want. We don't incorporate their voices. So it's an honor to know that we have placed them at the forefront, knowing that they're our future Black history makers. Some of them are making history right now. So they're shaping that history, but it's also important for them to know from whence they came. That's why Tyson points were so powerful. They have to know about the rich ancestry, the shoulders that they stand on. And so I'm proud to be here in my own school as a principal. I'm in my 34th year as an educator, 20 plus years as a principal. I'm a principal in Wilmington, Delaware. Amazing teachers. We have, and in our middle school, we empower our young people. We share power. And I know that's sort of the theme for today, is we allow them to plan many of their own activities, events. They run their own meetings. Start early. And this is the middle school. So we can start early with building leadership practices for these young people. And you see it on the panel, the amazing young people we have here today. So I think we have a bright future. We just have to believe in them until they believe in themselves, but keep building them up, trust them, and give them that power that they deserve.
Trinity, how are you working in your own value? I mean, you're a youth leader at Hampton. So what does it look like on a ground level?
So right now, I've really just tried to take matters and really think of what's going on right now. We are virtual and we're in a pandemic and it's a lot of things going on. Last week we had students that were in Texas, so they're not necessarily learning. It's just so many different aspects that as a youth leader, you have to take into consideration. So definitely in my role with the Student Government Association and specifically as the Director of Political Engagement this year, at an HBCU, pushing political engagement is imperative. We try to make sure that your voice counts, not just from November, but even we were making calls and doing phone banking for the Georgia runoff. Just so many different things to make sure that youth can be engaged right now, even when times are so difficult. Like that's something positive. Making calls and hearing someone that says, yeah, I'm 80 and I haven't missed an election. That makes a difference in my life. Like, of course, my classes may be stressful, but hearing that is just a brightening to my day. So definitely trying to keep our campus involved is something that, of course, it's a task, but it's something that when the events come to light and they really come into fruition, it's like, wow, it's a great thing.
And it's important also in school to realize it's easy to think it's just a bubble, right? When you're on campus and you're in your own world, but you're part of a larger society. And so it's really good to get that started early on and then build upon it even post-graduation. Moving forward, and I want to get Kiragu, Christian, and Sarah in that order to answer this next question. How has your own life experiences influenced you as a Black leader, and which leaders inspire and motivate you? Kiragu, I'll start with you first.
First of all, I want to say it's an honor to be on here with all you guys because everybody seems super dope. One of my idols is Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory is a fraternity brother. I actually met him when I was 19 at Virginia State University, and he's one of the people that truly influenced me. It doesn't surprise me now that years later, I've been a special educator in Baltimore City for 15 years. And about 7 years ago, I began doing stand-up comedy. And from doing that and learning to express myself in a better way, and then going into the classroom and teaching it after school with the kids and teaching it as a means for children to express themselves, my own star kind of began to rise, you know. And it's like you began, I got onto the union negotiation team. I ended up in Germany. You know, you're just going somewhere telling jokes, but people see you have a voice, and you're not afraid to say what you think. And people will honor that. The right people will honor that.
I
You know,
want to
so
stay with that too, because I actually interviewed when he was living, Dick Gregory, a couple of times, once in Chicago, once in Montgomery, Alabama. And one moment I had with him, he talked about fear and letting fear go. And once you do that, you'll be unstoppable. And it sounds like you even learned that for yourself. And that's something I carried. When it comes to comedy, though, how do you use that as a way to, I guess, creatively put in some social critique when it
well,
comes to issues of race?
that is mainly what comedy can do. Comedy is truth. Usually, if something is not true, people can't laugh at it. You can't find the meat. That's why you don't see too much like right-wing comedy, because it's stupid. It sounds ridiculous. But I learned from teaching the kids. Like I would have open mics after school, let the kids get up, and let's be clear, teenagers are not the ideal audience for like self-expression and standing up and being vulnerable in front of other people, right? So it's more about building culture and letting them be able to do what they feel comfortable doing. So some kids do poetry, some kids rap. And a lot of the things that they say are not welcome in the school environment, right? So those types of things, that provides opportunities for us to speak, talk about. One of the things you learn as a comedian is you can say whatever you want, but that's going to determine what stages you're allowed to be on. You know, so yeah, and doing that, we're able to like reach the kids on a personal level. And sometimes they don't even feel like messing with the comedy, and they just want to play video games. And I'm like, oh, we can figure this out. And we turn into a video game / open mic. So some of the kids who want to get up, they get up. The kids who want to play the video games, they play the video games. It's all about providing opportunity and also training, because then the kids can get up, they can MC, they can do, you know, things at the school and express themselves and
All
tell
about
people what they need.
exposure. Absolutely. Christian, what makes you a young Black leader, and what leaders inspire you?
Yeah, so I think, you know, a lot of people will just say it's a generic person, but as someone who was the first introduced to me as a Black leader would be Dr. King. I remember just opening up my first book probably at, I don't know, 2 years old, and being read to by my mom, sort of who he was, and then, you know, learning a little bit at school, and just knowing that there's a place for Black leaders, and that they can have such an impact and a legacy, like a Dr. King had, really inspired me. And I think from that point on, I just looked to follow what I felt was the right thing to do. As Tysley mentioned before, how important it is to lead with compassion. I think for me, when I see injustice, you know, there's something in me, there's a fire in me that wants to challenge that, and to figure out what's the best way that I can, you know, work against that, or try to make the situation better for the people affected. Personally, I've lived in 2 different areas. I grew up until about 12 years old, right outside of Philadelphia in the suburbs, and now I live in the suburbs of Boston. And so in communities that are, you know, very majority white, and I'm usually like only one of the students of color that are in like my upper level classes. Sort of my aim, I guess, for like the things that I try and tackle when it comes to activism has to do a lot with my own experience of finding a place of belonging in schools, and also trying to, you know, encourage and inspire my own peers to try and strive for excellence themselves. So that's sort of how I've came to where I am today.
It's amazing. Sarah.
Well, when I first started this work, it was Harriet Tubman. She said, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if they only knew they were slaves. And in this work, I find that parents don't know the power they have to advocate for their children. I came from a generation where your mom told you what to do and you did what your mom said do. And then I raised my children the same way, but when them precious grandbabies came along, I wanted to hear their voice, you know, so that's the generation I came from. So when you learn better, you do better. And my grandchildren have a voice, where my children, I raised them basically like my mom raised me because I said so. You don't have a voice in the matter. I said it, do it. I don't want to hear nothing else. Do that make sense? So
Sarah, how did you get to that place though, where you made that shift?
Because I walked in a new school in my community that values children's voice. And again, I came from that place because my mom said so. I did it, and I didn't say anything back. But my grandchildren have a right to lift their voice. Yeah. So I got to that place and walking in that school and seeing children and watching one of my 7th graders advocate to the principal, because he allowed one grade to do something that he didn't allow the lower grades to do. And she went to that principal and said, hey, Mr., I'm not gonna call his name, but you letting this grade do it and we can't do it. And he came to me, he said, Miss Carpenter, Caitlin came to me, and I said, as she should have. She should have. I mean, children watch everything adults do. So, I mean, again, watching my mom struggle from living on sharecroppers land and watching her struggle and move to the city. And my mom inspired me also, but Harriet Tubman, when we talking to parents, it's like you gotta change their mindset. Parents don't know the power that they have to advocate for their children. So, and it also took my mind back to SNCC when we talking about young people. Dr. King really thought that the young people with SNCC was gonna be a young people, the of them, but they went on about their business, like fiercely went on about their business, but Dr. King didn't get upset about it. He let them did their thing, and we gotta join the young people, because I mean, I wake up every day, I ain't gonna give my age, I wake up every day to learn something new, and every day when I learn something new, I tell that person that helped me learn something new, I learned something new today. So, I mean, we can learn something from these young people.
We can, Sarah, and I always say the day I stop learning, I'm gone, I'm out. There's no reason to be here, right? You have to do, it's a lifelong process, and I'm so glad that we can do that cross generations. Novi, when it comes to sports, who do you look up to? Who inspires you?
LeBron James.
Oh.
Because he's the leader off and on the court. He supports a public elementary school in Akron, Ohio, for at-risk children. I was lucky to go to Akron, Ohio, to the National Super Box Derby many years ago. And I learned that he had always supported families who lived through his family foundation called the I Promise.
That's an excellent choice. King James, Bron. This question is for the young people, okay? And I wanted to go Trinity, Khalil, Christian, in that order. What are you and your peers telling adults and people in power? And better yet, are they listening? Trinity.
Yes, I would like to speak on this because I actually wrote the letter for the 74 on this. So we're basically telling them that there are many issues that are affecting us and we need to be in the rooms to speak on them. You know, we are in a pandemic. We are having, our African-American communities are being affected disproportionately. So we're just having to deal with a lot, and to still have to have the pressures of school, or just aside from the pandemic, the same pressures that you were having when you were in school, and trying to be in environments. You know, I am at an HBCU and came from a predominantly Black high school, but there are some people that are the only person in their class, or some people that feel like they don't necessarily have the voice of their counterparts. So there are issues that we're trying to address with equity in the classrooms, with resources, equity within just the environment that we're in, and just trying to make sure that we have the same value placed on our lives and the same importance of anyone else that we're in school with.
Khalil?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And for me, so being student body president for like a year and a half, I had to do constant advocacy throughout that entire time period. And I think there's definitely some things I advocated at Yale, but I think when I'm talking to, let's say, adults in the Black community, one thing that I always harp on is the need to be comprehensive in advocacy. And this was a large reason why Black Lives Matter hashtag changed to all Black Lives Matter in the middle of the summer last year, because it's not just about advocating for Black men who are brutalized by the police, but it's also advocating against gender bias, advocating for Black women, advocating for Black people in LGBTQ plus community, advocating for Black people with disabilities, advocating for Black people across class lines. It's not just about the rich ones getting more CEO positions and diversity leadership, but it's also about raising people out of poverty and closing the racial wealth gap and doing so many more comprehensive things than just advocating for one community. So I think my biggest push is just to be super comprehensive and inclusive in who we're advocating for and the issues that we're talking about.
Well, Khalil, what do you make of critics who say if you focus on all these other issues at once, you're going to dilute one and not really move forward in any one particular area? And it should focus on just one topic.
Yeah, so I think that's a false either or. I think a lot of these topics are interconnected and tied, right? Racism and capitalism and classism are all one huge issue of oppression that started out with Black people being brought here to make other people money. So there's no way to really eradicate one without addressing the other. And on top of that, you can do multiple things at one time. So if there was a need for a race-specific issue that was totally independent, you can focus on that while at the same time, let's say a Monday and then Tuesday, also talk about something else. So I think movements are happening at the same time, they coexist, but the root of it is that all of these things are tied together and there's no real way to separate them in reality.
Okay. Christian.
Yeah, so for myself and sort of my friends around me who are working with me, we've been really looking to try and get transformative change from our leaders. One of the issues that I talked about in the letter I wrote for the 74 million, which I was very fortunate to have the opportunity through America's Promise Alliance, was about dealing with N-word usage and racism at school. And I was discussing how that even led to like one of my best friends needing to transfer going into his senior year because he was just so done with the bullying and abuse. So for us, for myself and like my friends, us being seniors, we know that our window is very tight to leave change or to have some sort of impact. So we want something institutional to change at our school. Something that we've been planning is trying to put a council or like a board of student government leaders that are students of color. But particularly, I'm trying to find Black, Indigenous people of color students to place on this board so that they feel empowered and that there is a spot for them there. Me going into high school, I was trying to find a place to serve on student government, and I was able to find a student council representative position. But I feel that, you know, other than myself, there isn't any other Black student on the board. So for me, something that was really important to me was trying to find a place that lifts up these leaders so that they can be there, so that the other kids in the grade or in the school see that, you know, there's kids in leadership that, you know, reflect their cultural background or the racial background so that they feel that they belong as well. But just, I think in general, the thing that we're trying to tell adults is we want some change that's going to be lasting and that's, you know, like something that can transform the way we're headed, because something I think I've noticed in a lot of like my friends is like how we lose momentum and how we lose interest especially if we just look back at how the racial justice movement was going. That's something that's like very upsetting and frustrating to deal with, because, you know, we want to keep, you know, activism, of course, cannot be like a linear line, but like for myself, I just want it to like be as upward bound as possible. So definitely trying to communicate that to our adults has been like our #1 priority.
Okay, and a little later in our program, I will get the adults to chime in and to, you know, some of the things you've heard here. I was taking notes myself. I know you all aren't really talking to me, or maybe you are, but you definitely want people to understand that young people, you know, have pressures too. That was one thing I took from this. You also want a seat at the table. You want to be involved in discussions. And I love, Khalil, what you said about comprehensive advocacy. I've never heard that term before. I don't know if did you come up with that, Khalil?
Yeah, I mean, I think the actual term that's used often is intersectional advocacy. I just said comprehensive because I thought it was probably a better way in my head of thinking of it, but either term works.
Trademark that.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, I see a book, I see a movie, I see a lot with that. But I do want to get to Trinity's point when you talk specifically about the pressures that you all have as young people too, that people don't always recognize. What keeps you going in the midst of all of that then?
God, that's that, and my family. I would definitely say that just having a support system that's always reminding me of my purpose and my destiny, you know. In response to the question before, you know, what leaders inspire you? Leaders that have still made a difference in opposition. You know, Stacey Abrams, Shirley Chisholm, those people that took circumstances that weren't ideal and created amazing things from it. You know, those are the type of things that I continue to think of, because it's like COVID is not ideal. Racial injustice isn't ideal. Sexism, all these things are not what you'd hope for. But you've seen people continue to make so many great things happen from it. So you have to continue to push with that mindset of they did it and they're in history books, they're on billboards, everything. I can do that. You know, we are the present and we are the future. So just making sure that we keep the things in mindset that if they could do it, I can do it, and continue to make it happen for other people as well.
Okay, and before we wrap this, thank you. Khalil, one thing I'm instantly picking up from you is that you're well-read. You know, you have to know your history. You have to know what's going on currently too. What would you say to young people who are maybe watching this right now on how they can gather the educational and mental wherewithal to even be able to speak passionately about these issues?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, the thing that I'm reading right now, just one quick book recommendation, is called From the War on Poverty to the War on Crime, The Making of Mass Incarceration in America. And I think it does a great job of explaining how after the civil rights movement, a lot of racism still existed, which creates these situations where poverty and all these things are still existing. But in terms of larger places where you can get books, of course, go online, Google. I actually found TikTok to be an amazing way to get information out there as well as accept information. So I have a TikTok account. All I do is talk about Black history all year round. So in as much as you can find a place, find the platforms that you enjoy and then look for education on there. And if you can't find it, then you can make it yourself, of course. Once again, Google is a great resource. Wikipedia is a great resource. Look up anti-racist reading lists or reading lists about Black history, and I'm sure 1,000 recommendations will come up.
Yeah, we didn't have TikTok when I was in school. That wasn't that long ago, but we didn't have TikTok when I was in school. Okay, before we go into our trivia question, I want to end this session with Novi, because Novi, you got a question. Someone wants to know if you're a superhero because of the poster in the background. What's going on there?
Wow. You know, Special Olympics really, you know, I mean, I'm speechless right now. You know, superheroes, you know, everybody can be a superhero. You know, right now, a lot of superheroes are the hospital staff, and you know, we can definitely, if you would like to contact me, we can definitely talk offline. But it's amazing. It's through Special Olympics. Special Olympics is dear to my heart, and I cannot say enough how much Special Olympics is a game changer, and it can also later on talk about inclusion. So inclusion is always the way to go.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. For some of you that just came on to the panel here, we're going to take a brief segue. I have a trivia question for all of you in the chat. I'm going to read it. Start thinking of your answer, and I'm going to wait a minute until the responses come in. So here we go. Question number 1. Who is the youngest leader from the Big Six Civil Rights Organization who together organized the March on Washington in 1963? Your choices: A. Philip Randolph, Whitney M. Young Jr., Martin Luther King Jr., James Farmer, Roy Wilkins, or John Lewis. And hopefully you can see it on your screen. The youngest leader from the Big Six. About 20 seconds. See how much you all know about your history. And I say your history because Black history is American history, is world history, and something we should all know and recognize. All right, we have some people here. Let's see. Oh, 78% of you got it right. John Lewis, the late, great congressman, civil rights leader. He was the youngest in the Big Six. Okay, he also spoke on March on Washington as well. So good job. The rest, let's see. The next leading was James Farmer and Randolph. All right. So we heard from the young people in our first part. We're going to get to part 2. I'm going to read over the introductions, though. We do this in television when there's a break for the people who may have just joined us to bring them up to speed. Okay. We have Christian Gaines, a senior at Newton North High School and an America's Promise Alliance board member. Khalil Green, known for being the first Black student body president at Yale University and a social media influencer. Trinity Woodson, a junior at Hampton University and America's Promise Alliance board member. Those are our youth. And Novi, I'll get to you too. When it comes to our adult leaders, we have Karagu Buta, a special education teacher, comedian, and revolutionary. Sarah Carpenter, executive director of Memphis Lift. Novi Craven, an athlete with Special Olympics, a coordinator at Special Olympics International, and a diversity and inclusion advocate. And Salome Thomas L., also known as Principal L., an award-winning principal and the co-author of the book Passionate Leadership and Building a Winning Team. Tycely Williams, the Chief Development Officer at America's Promise Alliance. That's your illustrious panel as we move into part 2. So keep your comments and your questions coming in the Zoom webinar chat, and we'll get your questions at the end of our program. Okay, for the adults, I'm just going to start with what you heard from the young people when I asked them, what are your peers talking about, and better yet, are adults listening? They said a whole lot. Sarah, first impressions.
My first impression took me to Psalms 8:2, out of the mouths of babes. And I'm not calling y'all babies because y'all young adults, but that I took you to church right there. And when I met with Kelsey and Nico the other day, I wanted to know what the American Promise Alliance was about. So I'm going to say to everybody at the American Promise Alliance, we owe America, y'all, and we got to do it for the young people. So America owes young people and Black people and brown people a whole lot. So I had to say that.
Thanks for taking us to church, Sarah.
Church.
Principal L, what did you think about our young people's comments?
So let me say amen. First, let the church say amen, Sarah. I was taking notes as well, Marissa, and they said a lot. And I think one of the things that was really powerful for me was that they talked about the importance of this being a movement, not a moment. So when Khalil talked about his comprehensive advocacy, which I already have my lawyers working on that for me, the trademark, you better hurry up. You better hurry up. But it's so important that we understand that it's a process. It's institutional, right? It's comprehensive, and it's going to take something else I learned from the young people today. It's going to take us being a learning community, not a teaching community, right? We all can learn from one another. That's what we need to develop in our community. And that's what we're developing in our school right now. We learn as much, if not more, from our young people than they do from us. So when we have to have an open mind, and we have to be willing to understand that they bring those experiences to us. So we have to respect their culture. That's why I go in classrooms and I rap for my students. Old school rap, of course, this new stuff that they listen to 35 Cent and all this, and Snoop Cat. I tell them we didn't listen to all that. We have rappers rap. It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes you wonder how I keep from going under. And friends, how many of us have them? So you're showing your age, Marissa.
I know.
But it's important for us to connect with them, connect with their cultures. And I started my career teaching special education students. So it's so powerful that we're here talking about the importance of the Special Olympics, the importance of reaching across all aisles to reach all of our children. And my students went on to become national chess champions. My school, these students were 8-time national champions, never done before in America. Our children and our community, where I am right now, the only school in Delaware to win 2 national chess titles, teaching kids to critically think and teaching our young ladies, making sure that we empower them. As you see from Kamala Harris and so many, Stacey Abrams, so many others, it's important for us to lift them up because they are king makers, as we see. And it begins when they're young. Dr. King, Malcolm X, Phyllis Wheatley, all of these people, Harriet Tubman, started when they were young. So we must invest in them, build in them. But the important thing is listen to them and ensure that we are a learning community, not a teaching community. It's a movement, not a moment.
Principal L, can you drop some bars while you at it? Because I'm feeling the energy, since we're on.
I know how to freestyle, in a little while, but I'm gonna let some other panelists get involved, but I'm just gonna make sure that I'll use my own compass, but send praises to America's Promise and make sure that my girl Sarah down there keeps bringing us that education church, because she's really bringing the spirit up, because she's preaching to the choir, but the choir needs to be inspired too.
Amen. All right, Karagu, jump on in here.
I was over here in the chat trying to hit up Khalil, like, hey man, plug your TikTok. Like 200 people on here, man, plug your TikTok. I'm thinking I'm doing something. I look on TikTok, he got like 250,000 people. No notes. I have no notes. And I think this is kind of like one of the things I've learned through the fraternity, through comedy, is you got to learn from one another, right? And you clearly, in this generation, y'all have a pipeline into everyone's homes and all, with your phones and Instagram and your TikTok. I sound old in the way I'm saying it, right? But that cannot be underestimated, right? The messages that you're sending out, the positivity that you put out there in the world. You find out that most of the stuff that people watch is stupid, all right? You learn, right? But you have to ask yourself as a creative, right? Am I bending to that? Am I doing this to get more, whatever? Am I sticking to a particular message? And I want to remind y'all, it's a group, The Last Poets, and they said that the revolution will not be televised. Right? I think all of that transfers right over to the phones and the laptops and everything. Actual real change is going to come with the relationships that you're making and the things that you're doing with the crowds that you're able to garner, with the information that you're able to put out there, actually taking it and putting it to use. Say, all right, we're going to do something in this community. We're going to do something to help these families, right? Turn it into specific action. That's not what Facebook wants. All right. They just use it to organize riots. All right. You can use it to help organize the community.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, you all are a perfect example, right? Everyone's listening and quoting each other, even here in our panel. And so I think both sides not thinking that the other side isn't listening. You got to go into it with an open mind to have that transfer. Novi, what
Marissa,
advice would, go ahead, Karagu, I'm sorry.
I wanted to say this before I forgot it. You brought up the example of John Lewis and the other people that were on the list there, Dr. King. That is multi-generational there. You have people who were students, you have people who are older, and everyone there, was able to take the ball and carry it for the next one, for the next however many years. All right, that's what we're in right now. We're just here passing the baton back and forth. All right, but you got to find the right one to pass it to and the right people to get it from.
Yeah, and know too that the ball can change, right? The
Metaphor
method
stretches.
can change over time. So now it may be through social media, whereas before it was demonstrations, sit-ins, and whatnot. Novi, what advice would you give to young people like yourself on working together to move forward?
First of all, yeah, y'all preaching up in here. That y'all going to church. Y'all are so amazing. I'm speechless. I'm just standing over speechless, like, wow. Anyway, could you repeat the question, please? Sorry.
Yes. What advice would you give to young people like yourself as well as adults? How do you make the two groups come together? What would you tell them?
Through my time at Special Olympics, I've seen how being inclusive is being respectful, embracing people of all abilities. I've brought people together in sports, in schools, in communities, and even in the workplace. Helping people learn to be inclusive is the best way to motivate everyone to take action to reduce injustice and intolerance.
Amen. You just took me to church. We got a bunch of churches going on in the chat.
And I think also always, it's, a lot of people think Special Olympics, Special Olympics people, it's for people in wheelchairs and walk. It's not, it's people, there's unified partners, partners are the ones like Karagu, right? And Principal L would partner up with me and would help me along the way. And I have a wonderful unified partner named Chris Bent. He's amazing, and he just helps me along the way. And not only does he help me, he makes sure I eat healthy, sleep, and just make sure that I'm healthy and making sure my family's good and everything. So
that is great. Thank you so much, Novi. This question, and actually Principal L, you kind of took me into it about the history that's being made right before our eyes. You look at Vice President Kamala Harris making history as the first woman, Black woman, South Asian woman to become vice president of this country. But then there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. I mean, even when it comes to COVID, you can see the disparities, even with that's reflected economically, health-wise, all of those various segments within society. How can adults and young people work together to shape our history and also shape the way the history is being taught in schools?
Right, which I think is the powerful part of the question. How is history being taught? Because our children need to know and understand, and our young leaders, which you can see today, they're quite aware of their power and their history, is that their history didn't begin with slavery. That these young people come from, their ancestors created mathematics and science. They were astronomers, they were engineers and architects and builders. So that's their legacy. And I think that we need to ensure that, number one, Black history can't only be taught in February. Yeah, we highlight it in February. That's just the sort of the commercial in February, but it should be 12 months a year, 365 days. Our history is a part of history. So, but we need to make sure that people understand that history is thousands of years old, but also we have to be comfortable teaching about Black excellence. So in our schools, you can't advocate for children if you're not really fighting the injustice that harms them. So, and that's how you build relationships with young people. And I'm sure Brother Butchar has done that. That's why those young people respect him, because they know he's fighting for them. So the important thing that we can do is make sure that that curriculums in our schools are teaching the truth, that it's not his story. We know it's history, but it's not his story. It should be the story of, of all people. But also, we need to live that example. And I'm gonna give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So many people say that they want to be inclusive, that they want to make sure that they want to have conversations with young people, or they want to make sure that they're inclusive of all stakeholders. But look at this panel. See, it's one thing for people to hear your testimony. They have to see your testimony as well. This panel is one where these young people know that we are serious about building a better nation, because we want to include them. We want to hear from them. They're not just listening to you ask the adults questions. You're asking them questions about what we can do better, what we can do to help them. So they see the testimony. They see what we're trying to do. It's not their fault that they live in this society. We handed them this society. It's our responsibility to help build a better society for them. So we must listen to them. We must work together, but we must put pressure on our schools. And as a school leader, I stand here and stand ready, because we all have to do a better job of making sure that our children learn about their own history, but the history of other people. Because my mother taught me, you want to learn about yourself, study the history of other people. And my mother's from Charleston, South Carolina. People from the South, you listen to what they say. But let's make sure that there's authenticity in what's being taught about indigenous people, about folks who have come from different countries here who have helped to build this nation.
Ragu, Brother Buta, I'm going to get you on this topic, but I want to stay with Principal L a little bit here. What can young people do to make those conversations easier? Because there are some adults who feel that there's things that younger people can do to help in that way, on both sides.
Right. And what we do in our school is we encourage our students to be advocates. When people talk about equity, agency is a large part of equity, right? Teaching students, like these young people you see here today, you hear them. They're able to voice their opinions. They're able to speak to their points. And our young people need to begin to put pressure on those adults, ask those tough questions, because that's the only way that we will be able to understand what it is that they want. So often they are diminished, or like speak when spoken to. Not today, not with this TikTok generation. We have to be ready and understand that these children, many of them are walking into our schools and know more than we do because of social media. That's why we have to be culturally competent. But those young people, and sometimes it can be daunting for them or intimidating if they're in an environment that may not respect their voice, may not respect their culture. So then what they can do is find an advocate, find an adult, find someone who respects your position, respects your voice, who can help you. That might be, your parent at home, someone on this panel. I'm going to speak for them, right? Anyone on this panel, if you need an advocate, I guarantee you contact them and they will support you, because that's what we do. And that's what our young people can do, is reach out and communicate. And as Khalil is doing, as you see, doing his research, reading, learning, so you come prepared, because as Malcolm X said, knowledge is power.
Brother Buta.
All of you guys, like I said, y'all are so amazing. And when I talk about like that generational knowledge and all getting like passed on, like you have to be able to put up with a little bit of cringe. Okay, like for the younger people, like when I walk into the room, my daughter just kind of rolls her eyes and she don't hear nothing I got to say. I get it. I was there. All right, I've been there. That is the natural circle of life, that whatever the older people around you are saying, you roll your eyes and you question it. All right, I implore you, keep that same energy. All right, as you get older, you learn things, you do things differently, right? And you would advise your younger self differently. Right. Yeah. Stay with the cringe if you can. If somebody is saying something to you and this sounds a super boring story, they're telling you about your grandma, your great grandfather, like that is not the type of stuff you want to hear, right? But it's the type of stuff that you need to hear to help you develop your own voice, your own vision of what the future can be like. By looking at the past, you can then gain so much information as to how to proceed forward, who to trust, who not to trust, right? So many things that are happening now, it's all cyclical. It's happened before. What happened in the period during Reconstruction, or when Jim Crow began and all, and people were attacking Black people in the South, people were having riots and doing that type of stuff. What types of things can you do now or whatever that is similar to the people who came out of that generation? WEB, like all the people who basically had to fight those same things, right? Read Raisin in the Sun. All right. See what Zora got to say. All right. See, go to all the ancestors. All right. You can go to your ancestors and all, unless your ancestors are trash. Some people, they can't go to their ancestors. All right. They are actively avoiding their ancestors because they are equal. You can't learn much from it. They're fighting the same war from 200 years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, I want to have Trinity and Khalil get on this topic before I close it out with a question for Tysley, and then I'm going to open it up to all of you watching right now to get your questions and answers. So make sure you're filling it. I think we already have maybe 15 in the Q&A. Put your questions there, and I want to spend more time on that. So Trinity and Khalil, you first, Trinity. How do you think our history can be better taught in schools? Because I know when I was in college, if you weren't in African American studies or something specific, you didn't get it. And then back to elementary school, it was a paragraph. So what needs to change?
I think that just as we've been talking about in general, comprehensive, you have to have things, not just highlights, but we have to kind of speak on the ugly history that some teachers may not want to teach. There are some things that we don't want to necessarily address because it's a difficult topic, or we have to actually speak on the ugly truth, but we have to rip the Band-Aid off. I think that in these past few months, we've seen the Band-Aid ripped off of so many things that we wanted to shy away from and not necessarily speak about. But now you have those kids that didn't necessarily know that it was real, but it had been happening 200 years ago, but at school they weren't being taught. So January 6th was the first time they saw something really happen. So I think that right now we have to really just make sure that, yeah, some things are difficult, but it's necessary. And not even just that, but Principal L said it, Black excellence. We don't necessarily have to speak on the tragedy and the turmoil. Like, we've seen so many people have such great accomplishments that it doesn't always have to be the difficulties. It doesn't always have to be the hurt and the just upset and the outrage within our community. We can talk about so many positive things. Even I'm looking at 9 Faces. The schools could include us. We are people that are doing so many great things within our community and for other marginalized communities as well, and making sure that everyone that's continuing to have important points and making sure that they're trying to include others, include them in history.
Khalil?
Yeah, Trinity's answer was perfect and took a lot of things I was going to say. So as not to repeat anything, I'll focus on one specific way that history is not taught, at least in the public schools that I have gone to. And that's with an eye towards explaining things that as they are today, right? I'll give you a quick example. So I went to majority Black and Hispanic elementary and middle schools, but when I went to high school, it was a magnet program, and I was the only Black kid out of like 240 students. They were mostly white and East Asian. And the students would say racist things like, oh, why aren't Black kids, like, why aren't they smart enough to get into college or get into schools like this? Because and a lot of them were not even white, they were East Asian. And a lot of them came in with this mindset that they didn't have the context of the past 400 years, let alone the past 50 or 60 years with school to prison pipelines and criminalization of Black youth, especially Black girls, in schools and things that are happening to today. So I think in as much as history is taught in schools, it needs to explain why America is the way that it is right now, why you see something like the Capitol riots happening, why there is racial disparities and racial wealth gaps and all of these other things, because history is taught in a very segmented and compartmentalized way where like this happened right then and there, this is really effects in the immediate, but like now it doesn't really have an effect on today. But I think without that knowledge, people don't have the vocabulary or the understanding to understand why so many things are important to advocate for, because there's no connection between history, the past and the present. And I think that's a huge misstep that can be fixed.
Thank you. Tysley, now that you've heard all this from our great panel here, what do you see as the important issues for Black youth and adult leaders to work together to address some of the issues we've heard today?
So Marissa, I think it's what we've seen demonstrated, and that is the power that rests in collaboration and unity. So when you look at the word community, nestled within that is the concept of unity that we've been speaking to and speaking about. And it is through that lens that I want to thank all of our panelists, as well as you, Marissa, in addition to the individuals who have joined in, because within America's Promise Alliance, we are seeking to be very intentional in the type of community that we are creating in every corner of the country. And it is imperative to us that that community recognizes and understands the unique challenges that Black youth face. And so I want to thank our young people who have shared today. You have enlightened, educated, and informed us. And you've done that in a way that we've been able to learn, laugh, and love. And so I don't want to hold us up between the chat box, but I also just want to take one moment to share for all of the other caring adults. I've seen many affirming comments in the chat box. We invite you to step into our community. We, under the leadership of Dennis Vega, launched a charge to become an anti-racist alliance. And while we exist in white dominant culture, we recognize that we have to be intentional in creating spaces and opportunities like this that center Black youth. We're super excited that under the leadership of Mike O'Brien, we will continue building an anti-racist alliance, and we will work with corporate, individual partners and caring adults around the country to build back better. So as we shift to the questions that are in the chat box, Marissa, I'm going to turn it over to you, but I'm just going to simply end with an invitation. I think, Nova, you said inclusion is always the way to go. And so as we build back better, we invite all identities that are represented to step into this place and space to ensure that we can advance the values that matter to each of us.
Yes, and also it's a great way to keep the conversation going too, Tysley, because we have so many questions. We're going to jump into them, but for the remainder, I mean, keep the conversation and the action going and do it through this organization. So thank you so much. We have our first one coming in from Steve Culbertson. The pandemic has pulled the Band-Aid off the issues of health, racial equity, income disparity, and even climate change. Are there positive aspects of the pandemic that youth believe gives them more and greater opportunities to find their voice, take action, and make an impact? Christian, let me get you on this one. How has the pandemic been a positive?
Well, you kind of get focused. There's nothing much else to do. So even though we're on our phones, due to like the movement that was launched last summer, or I guess relaunched for racial justice, there's a lot of sort of resources and news and knowledge that's at our disposal that like we're really very privileged to have like people like Khalil who are able to like spread all that information. And so during the pandemic, having that extra time and that space where we can just like learn off of our tech, that's given us a way to better understand our history, but better understand what we can do in our local communities.
Okay, thank you. Khalil, I'm going to ask you this question is from Taylor. Learning about the experiences of the Black community, I continue to be struck by how many Black people or how much Black people have done in this country without credit to make America a better place for everybody. How can we make this education available to everyone rather than just relying on those who seek it out?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And it goes to this concept that I've been discussing a lot with my friends, and just about like the privatization of knowledge. So like, for example, why do you have to pay $70,000 to get access to like books and other college resources that are literally would cost nothing to just put on the internet? And I think in as much as you can push universities and other places to publicize, there is, for example, Yale has an African-American history course that's free to the public. I think it's about creativity. I'd say that's the answer. So TikTok is one way, but Christian also has a really fire Instagram. We DM each other all the time, just talking about concepts. And it's about making these concepts bite-sized, snackable, digestible, and entertaining to watch. And I think in as much as it's not something that's horribly like somber or violent, even there are some ways of communicating that in a short way, but you can make the information, package it, and send it to a lot of people based on your own ability to understand it and then communicate it to others. So I think practicing communication ability, advocating for less privatization of knowledge, those are the two ways to get it done.
Okay, Trinity, as young leaders in your community, or as a young leader in your community, what would you say to a high school student about how to balance the awareness of what happened on January 6th, but learn from that event and others to move forward to be part of positive change?
I would say that January 6th was a day that we never want to have to come again, but January 20th, that was the light. And I think that seeing something and such a traumatic thing happen just 2 weeks before the inauguration, we have to remember why we were able to see the light at the end of the tunnel 2 weeks later. You know, voting is so important, and making sure that you take the opportunity to be involved any way you can. You know, you may be in high school and you may not be able to be of age to vote, but you can volunteer. I actually started the first HBCU partnership with Reclaim Our Vote through Hampton. We were making calls for months. And it's just something to make sure you take your role. You know, not everybody's role is protesting, not everyone's role is phone banking, but taking this time to really just figure out your niche in all of this, because I'm not going to say go out and be on the front lines, but just figure out what's good for you. And also the first step, as Khalil has said, is getting educated on these things and making sure that if you do want to be the type of person to give out information and to educate others, that your information is good information. And to also not be afraid to reach out to anyone. If there are students on the call, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure after this panel, you know, they will give information, but feel free to reach out to any of us, because remaining educated is so important, but also continuing to increase the community within that you have people to reach out to. You know, if your friends are also interested in that, make sure that you all come together, because one or two coming together, you know, he'll be in the midst of it. So you can just make sure that you have a community where you have people that want to work with you and have the same goals as well.
Thank you. Sarah, you have a question. How would you address the comment from many youth that adults don't listen to us, to young people? They don't value young people's opinion.
I would say that's not always true, because my grandchildren got a way of making me listen. And to the young people on this call, you gotta have a way of making adults listen. And just like adults out here advocating, we got a way of making the people listen. Y'all got a way of making adults listen. I listen, and I'm listening today. So I just want to commend you, young people, for not being as nervous as I am.
Oh, that's great. Principal L, I'll get you on this one. We have a writer here who says, I'm a school counselor in a very diverse high school, and every year I have tried during Black History Month to assist our students in learning not just about the obvious pioneers, Rosa Parks, MLK, but every Black person who has contributed to our country's history and world history. How can I do more all year long?
And that is a struggle that many educators face, because of course, people are comfortable, talking about the obvious, but people are learning now through social media and through television about the story of Fred Hampton and so many other, powerful people. So I think that we have to begin to go to the medium that our young people are using, but also begin to find, because what I've done is I often say to people, do you use this often? Because that was invented by a Black person. I make it very relevant. You use an air conditioner, that was invented. You use a refrigerator, Black man invented. So I try to make it very relevant. So when people say, well, the folks that say, you can go back to Africa, I say, unfortunately, we'd have to take everything back to Africa with us, and you'd be left here with no traffic light, no automatic transmission, no typewriter, no elevator. You'd be in trouble. So what you need to do is be comfortable recognizing the contributions. As Trinity says, the Black excellence, the Black love doesn't always have to be tragedy. We've made so many serious contributions, not only to America, but to civilization. But the key is for us to understand that those contributions are powerful, and that in order for us to learn and teach it, we've got to get out of that comfort zone. That's the big problem for people. They don't want to move into that learning zone that Khalil's talking about, constantly in that relentless pursuit of knowledge, because that learning zone is close to the frustration zone. So they're comfortable, God bless Dr. King and Rosa Parks and all of these great warriors for us, but they're comfortable talking about them, but they don't want to talk about some of these real soldiers on the ground. But they need to understand these, as Sarah said, and somebody asked Sarah a question about what about young people who say we don't listen. She gave my old school answer. We're not all, some of us are listening, but enough of us are not, because we're not comfortable. So because we need to move out of that comfort zone and begin to be comfortable making people uncomfortable. So for that counselor out there and so many other educators, find some allies. There are folks out there who may not even look like you. I'm learning every day, meeting people who do not look like me, who know a lot about our history, who are advocating for us, and who are supporting us trying to educate their own people. Let's align with them and get some folks to listen and keep pushing. And then again, reach out to your networks. Social media is powerful. Reach out to people on this panel. Reach out to the Alliance. Reach out to folks who are out there doing the work. We will support you. Principal L might act up, but he will also be your backup. Call me if you need me.
One other question while we're on here, Principal L, is related to schools. I guess from a teacher, the majority of my students are already facing cultural barriers and are already struggling in the traditional classroom. In addition, they are adding on virtual learning. How do we address these issues to our school coordinators and the board? The issues we're discussing now in this now virtual format.
Right, and I saw someone in the chat wrote a powerful statement and said, if not for the pandemic, will we be even having this powerful webinar right now? Which is, which is the benefit, as Christian said, we have more time now to do, to be more connected, to be involved with the tech and connecting with, other people in our own think tanks. But the way to get to those board members and those administrators is let's send them the link. I was sending the link to this to people, to folks that high up and folks that were below. Listen, we all need to learn together. We need to expose. There's a large achievement gap, but there's also a major exposure gap. We need to expose people to the fact that there are thinkers, that there are young people, scholars. You hear these young people here right now. I am just enlightened. There is hope in sight because we are seeing our future. But there's power in unity and in numbers. And I know it can be intimidating to go to a board member and say, hey, listen, we've got to be more inclusive. We've got to make sure that we're talking about these issues. So make sure that you are aligning yourselves with people who can support you and advocate with you. But I think that the key is educating them, getting them those resources where they can learn and understand that Black Lives Matter is simply about understanding that we want you to see the gifts and the lights and the talents in our children. That's all in all of our people, because when we all do better, we all do better. And that's what it's really about. It's making sure that when we're trying to elevate you, we can't elevate you if we don't educate you.
Wow. One question is probably the most popular one we're getting in is people want all of your contact information. I don't know if that's something you all will make available, emails and whatnot, but I just want you all to know that that's a big interest that we're seeing here today in the chat. This is for all the panelists. Maybe you all can click on the raise your hand function to let me know, because I don't know. But the question is, are any of you involved in passing legislation to change current laws that help to improve policing? And I'm going to broaden it out, not just policing, but any issue impacting Black people and people of color. Khalil, you want to speak on this? I saw your head nod.
Yeah, so there are two. The first one, really quickly, is not many people know, but 2 years ago, a Yale Police Department officer shot an unarmed Black woman who lived in the city of New Haven. Luckily, she didn't pass away, so there wasn't a huge national conversation, but there was a local conversation about defunding the Yale Police Department. And that's been an ongoing conversation with a lot of advocacy going towards the president of Yale. There's a professor named James Furman Jr., who's a Black professor. He wrote Locking Up Our Own. And he's been really helpful in promoting student voices, young people's voices. I even got a chance to talk to law school students during one of his classes about it. And really the conversation and the argument is that by investing in community resources and social services, you'll have a better crime prevention system than just by increasing police, which are meant to respond to crime, but not necessarily prevent it. And on top of that, another thing I want to plug is HR 40, which is a bill that's currently being pushed by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee to instill a committee for reparations and exploring how and when and with who reparations should be distributed to. So I think everyone should do research on that because it's really exciting.
Okay. Well, I want to thank all of you for all. I think we've covered a huge swath of information here when it comes to just being involved, not just with the issues that we deal with, but also bettering yourself mentally, emotionally, because all of that is very important. Novi talked about eating well, getting good sleep, all of that stuff, and just being better as a community as we move forward. Before I wrap and send it over to Charles, Dr. Charles Cole III for closing remarks, 10 seconds from each of you. And I'll start with, I guess, Khalil, since you're the big box up right now, what you gained. What did you gain from today's panel, Khalil? 10 seconds.
I gained an understanding that people in different generations, specifically what Principal L was saying about rapping with children, they really do understand us. And I think we need to be more understanding of them, and so we can collaborate and come together.
Okay, Trinity.
I would say that from today, I gained optimism from the other youth on the panel that our generation, first of all, is in great hands. You all are fantastic, and kudos to you for being great young leaders, but also to the adults that are on this panel and also the ones that are viewing right now. Thank you so much for being here to listen. You've given your perspective and you've also affirmed our opinions, and that's something that's so important to youth right now. So again, the world is moving forward, and thank you to everyone here.
Christian.
Well, it's been great being here. Great seeing all the participation in the chat and being amongst all these incredible people. I think I've, found even more examples for myself going in the future of, people that I can look to for support and help. I think something I wasn't able to mention throughout the conversation, but I want to say now is meeting people where they're at is very important, and it gives people access to become something bigger than they are. For me, the Paul Robeson Institute in Massachusetts. They met me when I wasn't as well spoken. I couldn't really formulate, my thoughts as well as I can now. But they were there to work with me. So even if someone's, and this echoes Novi's point of inclusion, even if someone's not, as polished or as articulate as they, as you, hope someone would be, just allowing mistakes and allowing growth gives people the chance that they need to grow. So I would share that.
Hiraga?
I'd say that, I'm going back to Zora. There are years that ask questions and there are years that answer them. And 2020 asked a lot of questions and 2021 came in swinging with all the answers. All right. When people were asked to put the mask on, they really pulled the mask off. All right. I ask that you remember this moment, keep it with you. All right. Because over time, people just going to act like it didn't even happen. All right. And you got to remember that soft, I don't know what that is, that softening of history that goes on. Like, you got to keep that same energy. We have all the generations here, the teens, the 20s. I thought it was funny, Trinity was talking about the young people. I was like, she's a young person, ain't she? Like,
We're all young.
They could have went to high school together. What's he talking about? He gonna be a Hampton next year. What's happening? But either way, yeah, keep this chain, keep it going. All right. And also another, because I like everybody dropping the literary things. Raisin in the Sun. Do the 89 version, since a lot of y'all might not read, go to YouTube. Check out the Raisin in the Sun, Joseph Osagod scene when he's talking to Beneatha, right? It's a whole talk about being on a circle, right? And how we're all on it. And you just got to recognize where you are in that path, right? And that informs you, that should inform you.
All right, Sarah.
I leave here with a little hope today than I had yesterday, listening to these young people, that one day we're gonna be gone. The older generation gonna be gone, and these young people ready to just take it and run with it. So I leave it with hope. I look for hope every day, especially in the education space. And no, I do not get in other fights that I see going on in America, because I don't think we're gonna change anything until we change education. In the pandemic, what we done went through in this pandemic is an opportunity to restructure education, period. And I want to thank these young people again. You're amazing.
Novi.
Wow, I don't even know what to say after all that. You guys really, it's amazing how much that, how many stories that everybody can tell, but also it's a good way for us to learn about each other, because all of us don't know each other. You guys, I'm just over here taking this all in. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you all for the lively discussion we had today.
You forgot Principal L.
Well, I started with you, Principal L, before I went to the others, but since we have you, Principal L, give us your takeaway.
Oh yeah, I didn't give my takeaway. I got a bunch of them, so I'm just gonna give you one now. To
Okay.
It's just. But we almost went through an entire session without someone calling us the older generation. So thank you, Sarah. But you earned that right. I do want to. I also want to thank America's Promise for putting this together, having the vision and the plan. A vision without a plan is a hallucination, right? So in our community, we got to start putting plans together. So I truly appreciate you, Marissa. See, that's why you had to let me speak, because I need to lift you up, right? Because you went through a panel, you gave everybody time to speak. You just moved around. I mean, you did an amazing, they could not have found it better. I need to take you to panels with me, right?
Thank you, I'm ready.
You did an awesome. Let's give her a bigger round of applause. The audience, I want to thank them for their questions, their interaction, the positive comments in the chat. That was amazing. And then I just want to leave with one of my quotes that I always leave everybody with. let's stop praying for a lighter load and start praying for a stronger back, because we know this work is going to be, it's going to be important, and it's not going to get easier, right? We just have to get better at it. I put in the chat, this work is our passion. Our job is to get better at, right? That's not the job. We're passionate about it, but we can do it. So thank you. Thank America's Promise, Tyson, you and your crew and your team. And let's make sure we give our organizers a big round of applause too. Nico and that whole crew, they're amazing.
Nico
Kelsey and Nico, just let's give them, they're in the background, but you know what? They organized all of us, kept us on point, did it all. So let's give them praise and props too.
Yes, they've been working so hard. And I just wish I had a principal and teachers like you, Sarah, Karagu, when I was in school. So I guess things are getting better as time goes on.
Can I just say one thing? Can I just say one thing? I mean, I would definitely wish you guys we all could be still connected, you know. We just met each other on Zoom, but definitely stay connected, because this is a powerful panel, and you know, it might be educational, you know, down the line for other people, but definitely you guys are just doing an amazing job, and it was a pleasure to meet you guys.
Great. Same here. All love, Novi. I'd like now to introduce Dr. Charles Cole III to offer some closing reflections. Dr. Cole is an educator focused on the advancement of youth of color, and specifically Black males. He is the founder of Energy Converters, an organization dedicated to working with students, their parents, and communities to convert their energy into agency as advocates for education. He is also the co-host of the 8 Black Hands podcast, which he leads with 3 other visionary Black men fighting for Black youth in the public school system. Charles, what did you hear from today's conversation, and where can we go from here?
I heard a lot of stuff, man. I heard some amazing stuff. I just put my information in there. First off, I want to start by saying Sarah Carpenter is the modern day Fannie Lou Hamer. And I think that you all need to really recognize that and hold on to that. I love that lady. And I just got to meet Principal L not that long ago. Me and him had an amazing exchange, and I love the work that he's doing. And these young people were amazing. I think that there was one piece that really stuck out. And I think what y'all were actually talking about was agency, and like understanding what our history is, and that our history does not start with slavery. And I think we need to really be strong on that. A lot of people don't know that the reason that there's actually free public education in this country is directly because of the South and Black people in the South, directly after slavery. That's the level at which Black people learn how to read the most, right? And so the part that I heard that was important that I wanted to reinforce, you have to know and know your history to know where your greatness comes from, because you move differently when you know that you built something. And I say this as somebody who went to a whole bunch of elementary schools, who had parents that were both on drugs, who was homeless and lived in 4 shelters, who is now standing in front of you as a doctor, right? And the way I'm dressed today is very intentional, because when I was younger, I did not see myself reflected in success. I didn't see myself reflected in academia. I didn't see these opportunities as things that I could be a part of. And I love wearing suits. I can wear one really well, but it took a Black man to show me how to wear one, because the teachers that I had that didn't love me, they didn't know how to wear suits. They was all boxy and too big. And then a brother grabbed me and took my measurements and said, stand up straight. You come from a proud people. And so there's somebody watching this right now that might have gold teeth, that might wear beanies, that might wear t-shirts, but as Black people, we got to love ourselves first. And I think that's one of the things that I heard. We heard young people who were agentic. And by being agentic, meaning they know what quality is, they know what they need, and they know, and they question those things. And what I would say is my advice, just summing up everything I heard, and I also wrote about this in my book, was 1, always seek out quality education. That means demand the best from your schools, demand the best from your educators, and parents that's listening and advocates do that too. And also know that the school building is not your only place to get educated. All right. This leads into that piece that y'all were talking about, generational relationships. Education and learning is cyclical. And so that means everybody within earshot should have mentors and mentees. Sometimes the mentors are younger than you, and sometimes the mentees are older, right? You should always constantly be learning, because check this out. I got a whole bunch of fancy book learning, And then I bought a house. And my uncle and my cousin, who didn't go to college, he was a firefighter for 30 years and retired. When stuff started breaking in my house, none of this book stuff really mattered until he taught me how to fix my faucet, right? So I ain't got to spend all this money. We have to see the value in all of our people. And I just think that that's just really important. The second thing is you need to have a strong self-identity to everybody listening. What that means is I want you to have independent thoughts for everybody that's listening. You ain't got to run to Twitter to get your thought. You know what I'm saying? I have young people and older people, I'll ask a question and they'll check social media first and then give their thoughts, right? And so I heard you all talking about critical thinking. And I think that that's something that we can't afford to lose. And then finally, we have to always show and lift up and put our Black kids and young people and even young adults in proximity to Black success. It's hard to be what you don't see. It's hard to be what's not possible, right? So I'm standing in front of you. This is what a doctor can and does look like and sound like. And sometimes they look like Principal L. And sometimes they look like Sarah. Sometimes they look like Novi. Sometimes they look like Trinity, right? And here's the last part. We don't have to agree on everything. Let's bring back healthy debate and exchange of ideas, right? Because we are in a moment that if somebody disagrees with me and I got more followers on Twitter or Instagram, and then I'm gonna put my mob on them, and then people don't give you their real thoughts so we can actually progress forward. We just go with what, who got the bigger following and things like that. I think that this was an amazing, amazing event. And I wanna say thank you to America's Promise, but Sarah Carpenter said something, and I want to leave it on this because I don't want us to miss it. With a name like America's Promise, we have to make sure and ask ourselves and check in as a country and as a people and as Black folks and young people and elders, are we living up to the promise that we've made for our young people? I'm standing here as somebody who was born in '83 and grew up in the '90s. And if you are a young person, you want to know what my experience was in the '90s because it impacts where you are now. I grew up in the crack era, which before that was the '70s and the '80s, where a whole lot of stuff happened that led into that era, which started from the '50s and the '60s. You understand what I'm saying? We have to understand what we have put people in our country through. We have to keep pushing on policy, but it won't be policy alone, because even when we get policies, even when these policies are built on the backs of Black people, which we have seen, even though we have shared the brunt and we the people that's getting knocked out live on TV, the wealth and the good things that come out of that policy that we spawn tends to be shared with everybody else. And so we have to make sure that we're looking out for our people, and we have to really define what that means, and we can't be afraid to call it out. And I would just say thank you all so much for having me. And just because a Black person may not sound like you because language is changing, I call this thing verbal gentrification at this point. We have a common bond, and we can't keep throwing our own people away. So those stories from young, I listen to the stories from 5-year-olds to 95-year-olds because there's something to be gained in all of it. Thank you all so, so much. I put my information in the contact. I'll do it again. And this is the book I was referencing. It's called The Education of Blacks in the South. This isn't my book, but it's actually a very, very good book. We built this thing. And just so you know, I'm gonna close out in 30 seconds and give it to you, Trinity. But just so you know, the white farmers in the South didn't even want education. They wanted to just stay on that farm. They didn't want Black people to have it. But then Black people pulled all the little money that they had, even right after slavery, and built public education. And then those same people that didn't want it came and took all of those resources. We have always been an agentic people. We have always fought for what we believed in. So don't let this new regurgitated view of history tell you any different. You come from greatness, and that greatness started long before slavery. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cole, so much for those wonderful takeaways. And thank you to all the panelists and the team, and of course, our audience for such an incredibly engaging and important conversation. And I'd also like to extend a wonderful thank you to our wonderful moderator, yet again, Marissa Mitchell, for keeping the conversation lively and just having a wonderful, experience and keeping it going. So before we do get off, I would like to, first of all, share an opportunity for some of our youth. So through the Power of Youth Challenge, America's Promise is giving many grants directly to young people working to promote racial healing and address systemic racism in their communities. So if you are a young person or know a young person who wants to encourage this conversation and create equity and within their community and at their schools or wherever they are, we would encourage you to have them apply, or if you are the young person, to apply as well. And applications are being considered on a rolling basis, and there are limited mini grants. So please submit your ideas soon. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. So it is a fantastic opportunity. And of course, we have to push it in a conversation like this. So again, thank you to our panelists, to our team members, and to you, our wonderful audience, for coming and speaking with us today. And we hope to see you at another America's Promise event quite soon. So everyone have a great evening and have a great weekend.